We will have the swearing in of our newly appointed planning commissioners. Our city clerk will handle that.
Each individually state your name for me.
Brett Johnson and Michael Gordon.
Please repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
to support and defend
to support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic.
foreign and domestic.
And I will bear true faith and allegiance
And I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California.
and the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely,
That I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion.
or purpose of evasion.
And I will well and faithfully
And I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, gentlemen, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Do we have any communications this evening?
No, we do not.
Thank you. At this time, we'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. At this time, we will have business from the floor. This is the time to address the commission with issues that are not on our agenda tonight, but are within the commission's subject matter jurisdiction. Each speaker may have a maximum of 3 minutes, or a group spokesperson also a maximum of 3 minutes. Do we have any business from the floor tonight? Please come forward. We have a mic up there. Fine. Please state your name, please. Is that it? Okay. Okay.
My name is Troy Lawrence. I'm a 3-year proud Vacaville citizen here. This is pretty much the stuff I wanted to go over at the city council meeting, but unfortunately the agenda matter got pushed back to the meeting that's set up for the community in Ulatis tomorrow. And I'm glad I have the commission here, and I just wanted to go over a few things. I want to say greetings and good evening. Thank you for your time and patience and attention. Congratulations on the new commissioners. I also would, like I said, my name is Troy Lawrence, a 3-year citizen of Vacaville that has experienced both medical and business and safe, good neighbor operation. I want to share that and help Vacaville. I've done that with multiple members that I've met from this community, from the city council meetings, to people that I've just done over the last 3 years helping them. My thing, in case people didn't see the city council speech a couple years ago, I get people off of opiates. That's my thing. I like to get people off opiates through cannabis, through CBD tinctures and other means. Very educated on it, over 20 years, and I want to share that and help Vacaville. Develop a balanced harm reduction safe access approach. Strongly suggest that the city should meet every 1 or 2 weeks with community stakeholders task force for at least the next 2 to 3 months to come up with some suggestions on how to balance the need for safe access with any concerns for public safety and minors. Regulation is good for minors. Prohibition only makes it worse, harder to control. Delivery works. Storefront will be good. I should be allowed to express my ideas and views collectively and commercially. That's been stunning for me for the last 2 years with your moratorium, for me helping others. I understand that there's a lawsuit that the city of Vacaville is ensued with the delivery. I'm unfortunate to hear that, but I know lawsuits take many a year, so I'm sure a lot will come out, and every city has their own stake and reason. Even with or without a task force, I want to meet individually with the staff. I want to meet with the Planning Commission director. I want to meet with the city managers, the city attorneys, anybody and everybody that I can do to help. I just want to say again and just suggest the community task force. And if you don't take on the community task force, I still would like to be involved with every person that's involved with that to make sure something safe and practical and accessible is there for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to approach the microphone for business from the floor?
I just have some ideas I'd like to throw out there. I know.
State your name for the record.
James Troyer.
Thank you.
Hi. You're going to be building by Travis Way and Allison. There's a little plot of land you guys are planning to build right next to the bank. And I noticed a lot of turkeys that like to live in that area. I don't know if they're native of California or anything, but that is a nice, quiet, peaceful area. I don't object to so much building on that area, but what I'm trying to focus on.
This is going to be an agenda item this evening.
Okay,
and
very
so
good. The one that's not on the agenda, which was my next point, is the golf course. I don't think that's on your agenda tonight. My recommendation for that, because I don't think nobody knows what they're going to do with that yet. Since I live in Vacaville, I work, I like to come home to my house, which is my refuge. I would also like to have a refuge in Vacaville somewhere, someplace that we can go. And my idea is thinking that, since you always have to get money profits for maintaining city, fire, police, whatever, if you could do something like an arboretum or something, nature, park, someplace people can pay to go see birds in like an aquarium or something like that, something that can give me a peace of mind, someplace I can go without always having the homes and always having to deal with the traffic. And since this is my community, and that was my idea, and I thought I'd like to throw that out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Or business from the floor, I'm sorry, business from the floor. And we will now move on to item number 7, the consent calendar. Commissioner McCauley?
Have one change in the minutes on this is, and I've gone over this with the recording secretary for item 7A, the general plan annual report, the last bullet point. The second sentence says the city and school district and individual entities. The word "and" should be replaced with the word "are." Other than that, I have no other changes and would recommend approval of the minutes.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? All in favor with the change?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. And we will now move on to item number 8, public hearing 8A, the Casa de Vista Apartments.
Madam Chair, I'd like to recuse myself from this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner, let the record show that Commissioner Beaumont has recused himself from this portion of the meeting. Nancy?
If I may ask for clarification, who seconded the consent calendar? Thank you.
And I believe that's going to be Albert Inault presenting this tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Chair and members of the Planning Commission. The item before you tonight under public hearings is the Casa de Vista Apartments. City staff received a request for a plan development and environmental review to construct a 245 market rate apartment project at the southwest corner of Allison Drive and Travis Way. The map on the screen indicating its location. A little bit of history or information about the project. There's 245 units. The site itself contains 14.41 acres. Of that, though, the developable amount is only 10.97, which yields a density of 22.3 units per acre. The project provides a variety of housing, studio units, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units. It has a very modern design, and in our review, we found it complies with the standards for the Allison Business Area Policy Plan and also the residential design requirements. This graphic shows the elevations of the apartment buildings, the modern design with the varying colors and materials. This 3D rendering was provided by the applicant that shows how the massing of the building will be broken up by setbacks and portions of the building being brought forward and different portions of the roof line exceeding above other areas of the building. This particular view shows what it would look like from within the site and the driveways of those buildings. This graphic shows what the clubhouse would look like. The clubhouse would be 2 stories in elevation. The amenities on the site include a swimming pool, a basketball court, and other various site amenities. In our review of its impacts on the environment, we concluded that a mitigated negative declaration would be best served for this, which we circulated for 30 days. We determined that out of the environmental impacts produced by the project, it would produce a less than significant impact with the adoption of mitigation measures. During that 30-day review period, we received 3 public comment letters, one from Better Neighborhoods based out of Southern California, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. Included with the staff report as a response to these comments, staff found that the comments didn't present any new impacts to the environment, and therefore staff found that no recirculation was warranted or necessary. So in conclusion, staff supports the project because it meets the required findings for the plan development and the environmental review. It would produce a less than significant impact with mitigation measures adopted. It would complies with the general plan and development standards identified in the policy plan and the city's zoning ordinance. It provides more housing. It has a good design, but it's also located near transit and shopping and also jobs. So with that, staff has a recommendation for the Planning Commission, and that's by simple motion that they approve or that they adopt the mitigated negative declaration and approve the planned development for the Casa de Vista apartments, subject to the conditions of approval identified in the staff report. That concludes my presentation. The applicant and his team is also here to answer any questions the commission might have.
Thank you, Albert, for that presentation. Before we open the public hearing, do we have any commissioner comments? Commissioner McCauley.
I have a question for you. On the south side of the project, which is the north side of the creek, there's a 12-foot paved, looks like it's a bicycle pedestrian path and access for maintenance of the creek. Where will that connect to? I don't recall on our citywide path system that there's another use to the west of that this path would connect to. So where does it go?
It will this project, it terminates at the edge of the project boundary. It's primarily, as you mentioned, going to be used for maintenance of the creek in case there's an issue that can't be reached on the southern side of the creek where there is a current bike path that the Public Works Department would be able to access any issues from the other side of the creek. So it's planned to be terminated at the edge of the project. There is a plan in the city's general plan to make sure that there is a connection between this area, the Lattice Community Center, and the downtown area.
Okay. I have one other question. It regards one of the conditions of approval. And this is condition of approval number 3. It's on page 6. The very last sentence says, the project will have impede activities on adjoining properties. I'm guessing that's a misprint, and it should actually say the project will not impede activities on adjoining properties. So was it a misprint, or I misunderstood the statement and there will be an impact on adjoining?
To clarify, that's part of the findings for the plan development, and our conclusion would that it would not impede activities on adjoining properties.
Okay.
So we can make that correction to the findings.
I thought that was the case, but I wanted to make sure. So if we get to the point where we take an action on that, we'll make sure we include that. Thank you.
Commissioner Fortney.
Yes. Yeah, Albert. With the application that was put in the project description back in November of 2018, I just want to have clarification that our friends and our neighbors at Travis Credit Union, that we had no parking on Travis Way, and that entrance into the unit along Travis Way was going to be an exit only. Is that correct still?
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments before I open the public hearing? Okay, at this point, we will open the public hearing. Would anybody like to say anything? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. Any further commissioner comments?
First, I got to make sure I disclose I did have an ex parte meeting with the developer and their engineer. We met on Monday. They presented the presentation of the map. I asked a couple of questions about how the site would be operated. They're not things covered by our conditions, but I did need to disclose that I had met with the applicant and the applicant's engineer.
I too met with the applicant on Friday, so.
Yeah, I met with the applicant as well on Friday.
And then I want to say, one of the things I appreciate in the staff report is we did receive an extensive letter of public comment, plus the two things from the state agencies, and there was a detailed reply to every one of those points. And I thought that was important because there were some important things that were brought up, and the fact that there were actual facts entered into the record by the reply made me much more comfortable then in looking at the findings of fact, that there actually are facts that support them, and the conditions of approval. So I wanted to make sure that it was noted that that response was important in my consideration of the comments, and I'm comfortable with the project as proposed.
Yes, Commissioner, you have to let me get used to you guys now. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I just wanted to also disclose that I met with the applicant on Friday. I am very excited about the plan. I think it's very much in line with what the city has set forth in its general plan as it relates to creating new housing of all income levels, and this is a great location for that. So I think so far so good. Thanks.
Commissioner Nicolai.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments as well. I think it's a perfect project for that particular site. I really do. There's other apartments nearby. In fact, there'll be an apartment complex right next door. You're by the freeway. You're by the credit union. You're by the nut tree. I think it's going to be a great project, and I think it's perfectly sited. I think if you could put it anywhere in town, and usually I'm not in favor of a lot of the apartment complexes, especially when they're in residential areas, but I think this is perfect. I think it's a perfect fit, and I'm wholeheartedly in favor of the project.
Commissioner Fortney?
Yes, thank you very much. I as well did meet with the applicant last week and hear that we are on track to possibly have tenants in November of this year. So I know there's still a parcel map that needs to be presented by Public Works and approved. So I would encourage staff and our friends at Public Works to make sure that this applicant sees that deadline and we get some tenants in before Christmas on that site. Thank you very much.
Any other commissioner comments? Well, I too met with the applicant, as I previously stated, and I am in favor of this. I like some of the amenities that they are including. I especially like the fact that they are having the swimming pool and amenities for the residents in the middle of the complex, but they're also scattering barbecue grills around the outside corners so that people can also just maybe run downstairs or out their door and barbecue and maybe meet up with some neighbors that are barbecuing and make friends that way. I think that's an absolutely great idea, and I like the way the garages are positioned in the complex. I thought that the way they were incorporated into the housing was a very nice idea and very nice fit for the apartment complex. So I too am in favor. I think this is the type of housing Vacaville direly needs, and I'm looking forward to seeing it be built. Does anyone else? Commissioner Nicolai.
I'm prepared to make a motion if there are no other comments.
Seeing none, let's have the motion.
All right, by simple motion, approve the resolution, adopt the mitigated negative declaration, and approve the planned developments for Casa de Vista Apartments subject to the conditions of approval and also making the changes that Commissioner Macaulay brought forth.
Do you hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries with one recuse. Thank you very much. And thank you, guys.
Make one quick statement.
Sure.
I just wanted to thank staff very much for their time. It's been a lot of effort in a short period of time, and they have been extremely helpful. Thank you.
And for those of you at home, this is Rich Alexander, and he's the developer.
Sorry, Rich Alexander. Good night.
Okay, we will now move on to item number 9, a business item, and it's letter A, the downtown specific plan, and our staff presenter will be Tyra Hayes.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Can I ask for a clarification on the agenda before we move to the next item, if you don't mind? If I could direct Madam Chair back to item number 7, the consent calendar and approval of the minutes.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on the record that the motion and second are made by individuals that were either present at the meeting or had the opportunity to review the meeting via Granicus or Channel 26 or some other recorded option, and that anyone voting on that item also had the opportunity to review the meeting and ensure that it conforms with the minutes. So,
do we need to take a revote on it?
I guess, Madam Chair, I would suggest that you make a point of clarification with the commissioners to make sure that those that voted and acted on the motion had actually had an opportunity to review the meeting.
Okay, who voted on it? Well, we all voted.
I did not.
You did not?
I abstained because I wasn't on the commission.
Okay, did you watch it?
Watch the video.
Okay. So are we good?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. That didn't even dawn on me. Thank you. This never happens. Well, it might. Could. Okay, now that we've gotten through that, we're back to item number 9A. Tyra.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the Commission. Tonight, we have before you an informational item. This is going to be an overview of the Downtown Specific Plan and the Downtown Connectivity and Streetscape Design Plan. You have the privilege of seeing our brand new logo tonight. This is the first time it's ever been shown outside of City Staff's view. As you can see, for simplicity purposes, we've decided to just call it the Vacaville Downtown Specific Plan, but we didn't want to overshadow the importance of the Downtown Connectivity Plan, and therefore, within the graphics, you will see that we prominently focus on transit, bicycles, and pedestrians. So why are we creating a downtown specific plan? The easy answer to that is because our general plan tells us to do so. In 2015, we adopted our brand new general plan, which contained many goals, policies, and actions pertaining specifically to downtown. Some of those actions directed us very clearly to create a downtown specific plan. The reason we wanted to create a downtown specific plan was to help promote the economic vitality of downtown while also taking advantage of the existing amenities and perhaps creating new amenities which will further the importance and the appeal of downtown Vacaville. So again, these are just some additional policies and goals identified by our general plan. All of these items and more will be addressed as part of both of these plans, which we'll go through as part of this presentation. So first and foremost, let me apologize for the poor quality of this graphic. It looks much better on my screen. I'm not sure how it's showing up on yours. But generally speaking, the downtown specific plan area goes beyond what we would normally think of as downtown. That is to say, it extends beyond Main Street and is generally bound by Stevenson Street to the south, Cernan Street to the west, Monte Vista Avenue to the north, and Depot Street to the west. So that does include Main Street, as we know downtown to be, but it also includes areas along East Monte Vista, almost making it to the high school, but not quite. That's not to say that we're not going to be taking the We're not going to be taking the high school into consideration as part of the plan. We'll talk about that more as we go through the presentation. But the plan also includes areas along the freeway. This will be important because we are looking to create an entertainment district downtown, and we already have some of the backbone infrastructure necessary to do so by having uses such as our downtown theater, our ice skating rink, and you may know we have a recently approved second theater approved next to the existing Brendan theaters. So we're hoping to build on our previous successes and move forward from there. So as I mentioned earlier, we technically have two separate plans. One plan is truly called the Downtown Specific Plan. That plan is being funded by, or partially funded by, a grant. That grant was awarded to us by Bay Area Metro. Bay Area Metro is a regional non-governmental organization composed of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Association of Bay Area Governments. So those are the people who oversee regional traffic and housing needs. We were awarded this because our downtown area has been identified by both the City Council and by Bay Area Metro as being what we call a priority development area. We call them PDAs for short. In a nutshell, what a PDA is an area that has been designated as a priority development area, mainly for high-density housing near transit. We're trying to get people to be less dependent on using their cars. We would like to see them begin using more transit, walking, and bicycling. So some of the highlights of the Downtown Specific Plan, I haven't forgotten about the second plan, we'll talk about that momentarily. Some of the highlights of the Downtown Specific Plan itself would be increasing the economic vitality, establishing an active 24-hour mixed-use environment. Another way to look at that is we're looking at creating uses that would extend into the night hours, so it might be additional restaurants. We're also looking to increase both housing and job opportunities downtown. We will definitely be looking at ways to increase public safety downtown during all hours of the day and night. And the big thing we're looking for is we want to be able to pave the way for public and private investment in downtown. So some of the things that we have been scoped to do, and you have this in your packet, is working with our consultant, we will be identifying 3 to 4 what we call shovel-ready sites. What this means is we're going to look very extensively at certain sites located within the downtown, and what we're going to do is we are going to provide a conceptual design plan for those sites, and if necessary, we will do the environmental clearance necessary for those sites. If everything goes as planned, we can simply hand the plan over to an interested developer and say, here, we've done the hard work for you, go forth and build. This will help meet our goal of helping streamline development within our priority development area. So in addition to that, you've heard me say economic vitality numerous times, and I'll probably say it 20 more times before this is over. One of the ways that we're trying to improve our economic vitality is to provide additional information to the retailers, and by also gaining additional knowledge ourselves in the public sector. And one way we're doing this is we are working with a local economist who we've worked with numerous times before, and he will be creating what we call a retail strategy. So he's going to look at what currently exists downtown, what could possibly be supported within the city's existing demographics, and what we should hopefully look for in terms of new uses that would likely add to the vitality of downtown itself. So with that, we're also going to be looking at ways to preserve existing housing downtown, in addition to creating new housing. We're going to be looking at creating a new amenities plan. As I mentioned very briefly, we're going to be identifying our existing amenities. These would be everything from our beautiful Andrews Park, the Creek Walk, other things that I may not be thinking of at the very moment. But we're also going to be identifying other things that could become amenities, maybe with a little bit of tweaking, which we'll talk about here shortly. We're also going to be updating various design guidelines for downtown. This includes design guidelines for these shovel-ready sites. That's going to be the most intensive in terms of having a lot of detailed design requirements and guidelines. We're also going to be creating design guidelines for private properties located elsewhere within the downtown. And lastly, we're finally looking at updating our somewhat older historic guidelines for downtown. Those predate our new general plan, so we thought it might be a good time to take this opportunity to update them. You may have heard, but there is a perception that there may be a parking problem downtown. So we've heard that and we've taken that into consideration. As part of our efforts within the downtown specific plan, we will be doing a parking analysis as well as a policy strategy. As we speak, our traffic engineer, along with our consultants, is preparing to do a traffic count, pedestrian count, and parking count following spring break. So the school will be in progress, and we'll get a true accounting of what's currently happening downtown at any given time. Lastly, we will also be doing a financial strategy. The way we're using this term is, once we identify what uses we want downtown, what uses can we support downtown, we're going to have to identify what infrastructure is necessary to support those uses. Then we have to decide how can we potentially fund those infrastructure improvements. That's where this financial strategy comes in. So we may not have the resources necessary to put in new infrastructure right away, but we can at least start identifying what we need to plan for in the future in order to meet the plan that we are envisioning as part of this process. So you heard me speak a lot about the downtown specific plan, but we do have a second plan. This plan is officially called the Downtown Connectivity and Streetscape Design Plan. This plan covers the same area as a downtown specific plan and has a lot of the same requirements as a downtown specific plan. So trying to make the most efficient use of both financial and staffing resources, we had received permission from the two grantors to merge the two plans together. So moving forward from this night on, when we speak about the downtown specific plan, I'm trying to explain to people, I think it might be in everyone's best interest to think about the connectivity plan as being a chapter of the downtown specific plan. It's a lot easier to simply call it downtown specific plan, trust me. It's a very long word. Now, this plan itself is partially funded by a separate grant. This grant was awarded to us by Caltrans. And this grant and this plan is focused on, as the name implies, streetscape design and connectivity. What it's really focusing on is improving not only the connectivity between point A and point B, or in this case, is say, the city's two priority development areas. Downtown Vacaville is a priority development area, as we've discussed. What you may not know is the area we just discussed with the previous item, the Casa de Vista, that is located within the city's second priority development area. That's the Allison Business Area priority development area. It is the city's goal, and I do believe it is identified in our general plan, that it is our intention to connect the two priority development areas together. So we would be doing so by creating a new bikeway or pathway between the two PDAs. So that will be something that we will be starting to work on as part of this second plan, which, again, think of it as a chapter of the downtown specific plan. So with that, we're really going to be focusing on addressing all modes of transportation. We're going to be looking at increasing the pedestrian experience within the public right-of-way as well as on paths. So we will be, there's that word again, we'll be hopefully increasing economic vitality, increasing safety, and hopefully creating healthy, livable communities. So as it stands right now, downtown Vacaville has some challenges, but these aren't challenges we feel that cannot be overcome. In fact, we see them as kind of an opportunity. This is our opportunity to perhaps go back and redo or maybe give a facelift to some of those areas in town that could benefit from looking at it with a new perspective. Historically, most roadways have been built with vehicular traffic in mind and in mind only. Very rarely, this is many, many decades ago, did designers consider what would it be like for pedestrians and bicyclists who are forced to share the right-of-way with vehicular traffic. So this is our opportunity to do so. Right now, I have a couple pictures up on your screen. Some of the challenges that we are aware of right now in downtown Vacaville as it pertains to connectivity and pedestrian and bicycle transportation is we know we have some obstructed sidewalks. We have some very wide and sometimes skewed intersections, which makes crossing intersections very challenging. We do know we often have bicyclists forced to share the roadway with vehicles, which they're a little harder to see than other cars, so we definitely have their safety in mind. And we are lacking pedestrian and bicycle visibility. This is really important as we move forward. I had mentioned earlier that while Vacaville High School is technically outside the boundary of our downtown specific plan project area, we would be remiss not to take the students into consideration, being that they are the primary users of our downtown transit station, and they're the primary demographic who's either walking or riding their bikes to school. So we're talking about Vacaville's future here, so we really want to make sure we get this right. So one way we can do this is we can start thinking about complete streets. So I'm sure you're all wondering, what's a complete street? A complete street is a street that's been created with all modes of transportation in mind. So here you have a cross-section of what a complete street could look like. In this representation, you can see that we have very comfortable sidewalks for the pedestrians. They're usually well lit, unobstructed, and in some cases they are separated from vehicular traffic, further lending to a sense of comfortability for the pedestrian. On this cross-section, we also show that we have dedicated bike lanes. Bike lanes come in all forms, shapes, and sizes. So sometimes a bike lane is simply a painted line on a street. Sometimes they're separated from lanes of traffic by maybe a raised median of sorts. Other times they are separated by a landscape strip. There's many ways to do this, and a lot of that is based on how much width we have within the public right-of-way. Sometimes we can squeeze a bike lane into a very narrow street. Sometimes we can't. So this is something that will also be looked at very closely as we move forward with this plan. So also a complete street looks at the safety of its crosswalks. You may be aware that we do have one or two, maybe more, I'm not sure. We have a couple of lit crosswalks in town where a student or just a pedestrian can hit a light, the lights flash, and it alerts vehicular traffic to someone who's getting ready to step into the public right-of-way and cross the street. It just helps lend to their visibility. On the other side of this on the other side of this cross-section, we show how a planting strip is sometimes used to further separate pedestrians from vehicular traffic. And lastly, sometimes we just have a nice little green space on the side of the road to help break up just the appearance of a lot of hardscape. So again, we've got many opportunities to help enhance our downtown. I know it doesn't always go hand in hand, so I would love to point out that a lot of people have failed to realize that by increasing connectivity and increasing a pedestrian and or bicyclist comfortability, walking or riding on the streets can help promote economic vitality. This is done so because someone who's willing to stroll at a leisurely rate on a sidewalk is more likely to window shop and hopefully get intrigued enough to go into the shops they would not have else known were there had they been speeding by in a car. So here I just picked something. I think everyone's kind of familiar with downtown. This is one of our areas we thought we have potential for a lot of improvements. We definitely see this as an opportunity. So here, this is the intersection of Dobbins and Merchant. This is where we have a very skewed intersection. It's a little bit off screen, but this is where the road splits. Moving forward, you go onto Dobbins Street, but if you just veer ever so slightly to the right, that continues onto Cernan Street. It's a one-way street with diagonal parking, so that will also lead you to Main Street. Here, what appears to be an alley, and it functions as an alley, is technically a road. Forgive me, I don't exactly remember the name. Trianon. Okay, I'm going to go with you. That sounds about right. So we do have a roadway here, but it doesn't function as a road. Perhaps at one time it did, but it may have outlived that usefulness. It is now mainly used as an alleyway. If you look really closely, you could probably see a couple of dumpsters and a couple of things being stored in the back. For the most part, this is a very large area that's highly underutilized, and it includes a lot of hardscape. It kind of happened organically, but we recently had a new retailer go into the shop just off screen to the left of this alley. It's a little apparel shop to the left. What they have been doing is they've seen this as an opportunity, and working with the city, it's my understanding they've done everything on the up and up, they will occasionally host movie nights in this public right-of-way area. What they do is they bring out hay bales for seating, which are very easily removable, should someone need to get through there in a hurry. But then they simply use the side of the building as a movie screen. So they have created exactly what we're hoping to create in a more formalized way, and that is they've created a public gathering space. So it's already happening. There's already people within our community who see a need and are looking for a way to fill that need. We would like to take this opportunity, given that we've received quite a bit of grant money, to create a plan to formalize improvements such as this. So another way we could potentially increase the visibility of downtown is with all this hardscape, this could be an opportune location to create public art. So to the little inset picture to the bottom left, this is a conceptual plan that was created by a UC Davis student a few years ago. A few years ago, the planning department had worked with some senior students from UC Davis, and as part of their senior project, they all identified areas within Vacaville that they could see doing some public improvements to. One such student had identified, let's activate some alleyways. And as part of that project, they created this conceptual plan. This is the actual location we're looking at in the picture. So you have AMFETS here. Is it Trianon Street, and or alleyway as most of us think of it. And here what they're showing is some simple streamers, maybe a little bit of art on the walls itself, and I kind of find this interesting. They've added a vertical garden to the wall. What's not shown here, but there is something, is there is also a possibility or an opportunity to put a mural on the side of this building, and if not this building, perhaps another building that calls out, this is Vacaville. We would love nothing more than to be like other cities where people go to stand in front of a mural and simply take a picture and send it to their friends. You may have seen such things in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas. People take their pictures and they share it on social media. So that's just one additional idea that we could be looking forward as we move forward through this plan. We are required by the Caltrans grant to include a large art component to this plan. And the rationale behind that is if you provide art, people are more likely to get out of their cars and walk to it, to experience it. So with that in mind, another way we could use or reactivate our alleyways is to create galleries. Here we have an example, and it might be a little extreme, but we have a brightly painted alleyway that just encourages people to be part of their community. So I'm sure you've seen these in neighboring cities. They come in all different forms, all different colors, you name it. But they don't have to be so bright and bold. In many cases, an activated alley is simply an alleyway that's been cleaned up and people have added lights to it. With the lights, people now feel safe and they're more likely to use that alleyway. In some places, alleyways remain within the public domain and they're available for anyone to use. In some cases where cities do not have the means to maintain the alleyways, they will sell portions of the alleys to private users to maybe expand their eating areas. So a lot of alleyways will have additional outdoor seating to an adjacent restaurant. Again, these are all ideas. We're not married to any of them, but these are some of the things that we will be asking people to comment on throughout the process of creating these plans. So as I had mentioned, the Caltrans grant does have a requirement for heavy art components. Here, we had gotten this from somewhere. There's an app. There's an app for everything nowadays, isn't there? You can go to various cities and you can have an art app on your phone and it will provide you a map of a trail you can follow in order to see local art installations. So that's just an idea that we'd kind of played with. It might be ideal to do that along a pathway that perhaps connects our two priority development areas. It also might be very beneficial to have that along our creek walk. It'd be a great way to promote creek walk, beyond what people think of when you think creek walk. Most times people hear creek walk, they think about the concert series, which is a part of it. That's great. But there's so much more to Creek Walk, which I'll show you some pictures here in just a moment. So we are going to be working with our art council, and we're going to be speaking to various groups throughout the process to see what we can do in terms of commissioning new art projects. One of the easiest things a community can do to promote art within their communities is to allow the painting of utility boxes. Goodness knows, all cities have a plethora of utility boxes. So it's hard nowadays to go to any large city and not see painted utility boxes. So that is something we will be looking into. And just for a little fun, some of you may recognize the rabbit on the left-hand side of the screen. I apologize, I don't know all the details about what I'm about to talk about, but a few years ago, it's my understanding that our art gallery, or perhaps the museum, if anyone knows, they can correct me.
Museum.
They had sponsored an art installation of these rabbits throughout Vacaville, and it was wildly successful. People would go to the known location of these rabbits just to look at them and take pictures with them. So the picture on the left is not just for illustrations. This is actually an example of what we've already done and what has already been well received within our community. So another way art can be incorporated into this plan is to incorporate it into the functionality of our streetscapes. So what we have here is another mock-up of what this could look like. It's conceptual, nothing more. On the left-hand of your screen, you see an existing picture of a sidewalk on Elmira Road that goes under the I-80 overpass going towards downtown. Right now, it's a little cumbersome for someone who wants to walk this pathway, or if they want to ride their bike. There's a lot of cars. If you're familiar with the area, you'll know this is near one of our largest intersections within town. So it doesn't lend itself to the pedestrian experience. So one way we can combat that is to incorporate some of those elements I'd gone over as part of our complete streets cross-section. And that is to further separate the pedestrians from the vehicular traffic, to increase lighting, and to incorporate some art components. These are a couple other ideas how we could potentially increase the pedestrian experience downtown. As I had mentioned a few years ago, we had partnered with our UC Davis students. They had done their senior project in Vacaville. And one of those students had identified the need, or potential need, for a permanent farmers market akin to what we have in Davis. So what we have here on the left-hand side of the screen is their conceptual plan of what a permanent farmers market could look like in Vacaville. While this was proposed as part of a senior project, this specific conceptual plan gained a lot of traction amongst staff. It made it all the way up to our city manager's level. So knowing that, we thought it was very important that we incorporate it as part of this plan. As of right now, we are thinking it might be suitable for a location such as School Street or along East Main in front of Vasquez Deli. So creating a new plan can be very daunting. And creation of a new plan definitely will raise questions that we not yet have answers to. However, one thing to keep in mind as we move forward through this process, and it's going to take 2 years total to go through this process, is this plan is building on the successful foundation that was created by the city roughly around 2004 with the creation of Town Square. Once upon a time, I'm sure someone sat where I am right now, and they were probably talking about the Town Square project. And while at a conceptual level it probably sounded wonderful, there was probably a lot of concern on how they can make it come to fruition. The creation of the Town Square project required the abandonment of Bernard Street, which some of you may remember. It is shown in the picture on the left-hand side of your screen. Just to kind of orient everyone, on the south side of your screen, that's Main Street. On the left-hand side of the screen, that is Dobbins. On the right-hand side, you have Andrews Park and you have the creek. In between the creek and Dobbins, you have what is no longer there, Bernard Street. Bernard Street really wasn't necessary, was wasn't used as heavily as it should have been or was at one time. Therefore, someone had the idea of abandoning it and developing it. But that wasn't going to be enough. There were existing uses downtown. Those uses would have to be relocated, and some of those buildings would have to be demolished in order to make room for this grandiose idea known as Town Square. At that time, it was simply a plan. It wasn't a real project. It wasn't something you could see. It wasn't a place you can go visit. It was simply an idea. All plans start with an idea, and that's what we're facing right now. Needless to say, someone had the will and the belief to move forward with that plan, and what that yielded was Town Square as we know it today. Here we have a side-by-side comparison. We have a side-by-side comparison of the area known as Town Square today. On the left-hand side, you have a before photo. This photo was taken from Bernard Street looking south towards Main Street. Again, the street no longer exists. However, if you were to turn around and look the other way up what used to be Bernard Street, you're now going to be looking directly at Town Square. So just in case I lost anyone, what we're looking at right here, if you were to draw a line or imagine a road going straight through, that was Bernard Street at one time. Here's another before and after picture. The picture on the left is the location of, someone just saw it. It's near the driveway that now leads into the Solano County Library, Town Square Library.
That was a Mexican restaurant.
It was, yes. So that was one of the businesses that had to be relocated. And then once they were relocated, the building was demolished. And it was demolished for the purpose of creating a parking lot that would support the brand new library as well as, I had it on the other slide, a very large commercial building. In fact, it was just under 15,000 square feet of commercial building. That also included some restaurants. Let me back up. So what the removal of Bernard Street and the removal of these three businesses yielded was a 26,000 square foot library, a 157 spot parking lot, 20,000 square feet of public plaza area, and just under 15,000 square feet of commercial and restaurant businesses. A little bit further to the east, we have another side-by-side comparison. I didn't do that one, I swear. So you may be familiar with this. On the right side, it's a pretty iconic building. I think we all know what this is. This is the new Vasquez Deli, not to be confused with the old Vasquez Deli, which no longer exists. That too has been removed and is now making way for a new project known as the East Main Project. But on the right-hand side of the screen, you have the new Vasquez Deli. This was our first mixed-use building, to my knowledge anyhow, in downtown Vacaville. So we have the deli downstairs, and we have 3 apartment units on the top floor, as well as an office. Again, this was a new idea for Vacaville, but it was wildly successful. So we do have mixed use in Vacaville, and we're hoping to continue on that trend. Before the creation of the new Vasquez Deli, you have the before picture shown on the left-hand side of the screen. I don't know what it was used for, but there used to be a little red shed that was hidden behind a fence covered in vegetation. So again, this is just another example of some of the hurdles we had to overcome by relocating businesses and demolishing the buildings in order to make room for progress. In this case, the progress was the creation of the Vasquez Deli and our first mixed-use building downtown. Not to overlook our connectivity plan, we are also building on the success of a previous project the city had undertaken roughly about the same time as Town Square. This is Davis Street looking towards Main Street. On the left-hand side, you see the before picture. This was Davis Street. It was a typical street, not to speak poorly of Davis Street, but there was nothing special about it at the time. It was simply just a path to get to another location. The after picture included some pedestrian and streetscape improvements, which you can see here in the picture on the right-hand side. So what had been done here is some colored concrete was added to the sidewalks, some stamped asphalt and colored asphalt was added to the crosswalks, so they stand out. You know when you're driving down Davis Street, there is a potential for a pedestrian to cross at this location because the crosswalk is highly visible. It's different. It stands out. But in addition to the street improvements, back in the days when the city had redevelopment money, we were also able to fund the Welcome to Downtown Vacaville sign, which now serves as the Davis Street entry into our official downtown area. So that sign has become quite iconic. If you ever Google Vacaville, it's usually one of the first images that pops up. We use this sign to also announce events downtown, including our Creek Walk series, which happens every Friday night during the summer months. So speaking of Creek Walk, so I previously mentioned when most people hear the word Creek Walk, they think about our concert series, which is great. That is the Creek Walk, but it's not the entirety of Creek Walk. Creek Walk is actually referencing a walkway that was constructed along Ulysses Creek roughly around 2004, maybe a little bit prior to that. So here again, we have some side-by-side comparisons of the area. This is the creek that runs through Andrews Park. On the left-hand side, you see pictures of the creek in its natural, unimproved state. To the bottom of that, it's a little hard to see on this screen. You might have a clearer vision on your screens. But what we have here is an above-grade water line that has since been incorporated into a pedestrian bridge, and that is shown on the right side of your screen. This is the pedestrian bridge that crosses the creek directly behind the Town Square Library. And lastly, the picture on the top right is an official picture of Creek Walk as it exists today. It is our mission as part of this project to make more Vacavillians aware of what we have in terms of amenities downtown. This exists now. We're not sure everyone's aware of that. So that's going to be one of the hurdles we're going to have to cross as we move forward. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. As I've mentioned, we've received 2 grants to date that fund approximately, well, let me back up. We have received 2 grants to date to help fund this very large effort to create a downtown-specific plan. They're shown on your screen. You can read the numbers just as easily as I could read them to you. What I do want to bring to your attention is, while the city is currently slated to fund just under $400,000 of this plan, we are in the process of applying for a 3rd grant. This is a one-time guaranteed grant. It's the Jobs to Housing grant, sometimes called the SB2 grant. And that one-time guaranteed planning grant is awarded in the amount of $310,000. So the city's financial contribution to this plan will be reduced by whatever money we receive by that grant. And assuming we get the maximum grant, over 80% of the total cost of this plan will be funded by grant money. So this is a huge opportunity for the city of Vacaville, and all of this was made possible by the goals, policies, and actions identified in the general plan. The general plan is the key to everything. Is with that we were able to, what's what I'm looking for? We were able to successfully compete in the grant award process. So again, it all starts with a plan. Now, I'm not trying to make a joke here, but in this case, it started with a general plan. But just as we want to see an improved downtown, we've got to start somewhere, and that somewhere in this case is our downtown-specific plan. So, how long do we have to do this? Well, we have 2 grants, as I've mentioned. One grant is requiring us to have a portion of the downtown-specific plan done sooner than the rest. The Downtown Connectivity and Streetscape Design Plan must be completed at least to a certain point by February of next year. What that means is we have a very aggressive schedule, and this is what's going to be receiving the majority of the attention this next calendar year. So next time you see me, we're probably going to be talking about the Downtown Connectivity Plan. That's not to say that we're not going to be working on the downtown-specific plan at the same time, because we are. We're working in the same geographic location. We're working on the same requirements. We just need to make sure that we have something to give to Caltrans come February of next year. Once that is done, we will finish up the downtown-specific plan, which has a due date of March 2021. So we have 2 years to complete the entire plan. Lastly, we have extensive outreach proposed for this plan. This is a requirement of both grants. Well, we do have both a citizen as well as a technical advisory committee. At the March 26th meeting of the City Council, the City Council appointed 10 members to our Citizen Advisory Committee. You have those committee members' names and their contact information in your packet. They do represent a wide spread of business owners, property owners, and other interested groups in the downtown area. We will be setting up stakeholder interviews in the near future. We are going to be heavily using our brand new public outreach website called Let's Talk Vacaville. If you've been on social media anytime in the last week, you've probably seen a lot of people are already talking about this new website. We are going to be using it very heavily for this project. In fact, you can go on there now and you can get a general overview of what the project entails, and you'll see on the lower left-hand or lower right-hand side my picture, my direct contact information. You have my email and you have my phone number. Anyone can contact me on these projects at any time. In addition to that, just to make it fun, we also have surveys and polls that we'll be posting from time to time. While we haven't committed to it quite yet, we are tentatively scheduled to hold a multi-day workshop / charrette in mid-May. Specifically, we're looking at the dates of May 21st through May 23rd. Once we know more, we'll make sure to inform both the Planning Commission as well as our City Council of those dates. And it is highly recommended that you try to stop by and just hear what the community is saying in terms of what they would like to see in our downtown. So as I conclude my presentation, I just thought it'd be fun to share a quote that's well known to all planners all over the world. And that quote is from one Mr. Daniel Burnham. And it reads, "Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans. Aim high in hope and work, remembering that a noble, logical diagram, once recorded, will never die. It all starts with the plan. This is our opportunity." That concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Tyra. That was amazing. You did a fabulous job. That was super informative, interesting, great work. Commissioner comments, let's see. First light on will be Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. First of all, I commend you on all the hard work. I actually, being the new guy, read this entire packet almost word for word, and I know that a lot of work goes into it, and we appreciate that. Specific question about your map on the last page. It identifies 2 expanded PDA's areas, and it looks to me like those are residential areas. What is the specific plan with regard to the residential areas?
I'm trying to think how best to answer that question. So one of the requirements for the downtown specific plan is we are to look at not only creating new housing opportunities, but also to retain existing housing. So in this case, the 2 expanded areas, I should probably explain what that really means. The expanded areas are those areas that were officially designated as part of the priority development area. However, they don't fall within the downtown boundary as identified by our general plan. So we had a little bit of an inconsistency with boundaries there. But that said, as you had mentioned, correctly so, those areas include housing. A lot of that housing is slightly older, and it is very important to the community that we retain that housing. So our consultants will be working with us to identify the state of that housing and to look into the demographics of that housing. Who's currently residing there? What's the overall demographics in terms of the age, the race, the income levels, you name it, of those residents? And what can we do to preserve it moving forward? So there may or may not be any changes to these areas. We just don't know quite yet.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Johnson.
Other Johnson.
I can say Commissioner Johnson and everybody talks.
Tyra, well done. It was a very thorough presentation. Definitely excited to see movement happening in the downtown, which I'm sure I speak for all of us here that is very exciting. One of the things, I mean, I have a slew of questions, but I'm sure they'll get vetted out through the kind of planning process, so I won't get too far into them. One of the main questions I have is, how do we get existing property owners on board and bought into this plan as it relates to those who have current tenants that may or may not be interested in getting rid of those tenants?
That is a great question, and that's going to be a challenge for us. That said, we are going to make it our mission to speak to everyone and anyone who's willing to talk to us, and that includes the property owners. With the use of such strategies, including our retail strategy as well as all the other ones we had mentioned previously, we're hoping we'll be able to demonstrate to them in a very clear, kind of analytical way how they could best benefit from perhaps changing their tenants and or renovating their buildings. So we want to show them how some changes will not only benefit the city, but will benefit them as a property owner.
Long-term rent. Okay. And then I do like the idea of the complete street concept, and it may be a little self-serving for me, but I think Buck Avenue is a great example of that, with kind of scattered sidewalks and segments where there's not sidewalks. And while I think that it's outside of this boundary area, is that a project type that the city would be looking to get completed? And then also, what would be the funding mechanism for a project like that, being that there's no redevelopment agency anymore, and probably not current projects that are in the Public Works business plan?
Okay, to answer the first part of your question first, you are correct. Most of Buck Avenue is not located within the downtown boundaries. That said, our general plan has a policy that specifically speaks to look into providing sidewalks along the entirety of Buck Avenue. So we already have that directive. That's going to work on our benefit should we be given the opportunity to apply for a grant that could potentially fund those improvements. Now that said, if you're familiar with Buck Avenue, the location where we don't have sidewalks currently, those areas are under private ownership. So it will require a lot of public outreach to those property owners. Once again, just like with the business owners, we're going to have to explain to them and show them that not only will the creation of the sidewalks benefit the city as a whole, but it's also going to benefit them as that property owner.
Would they, I would think that there would be a public right-of-way in that area where a sidewalk normally would be. Is that maybe a path to discussion, at least?
I'm honestly not familiar with public right-of-way in its locations in Buck Avenue, given its age. That is something we will look into as part of the overall project. We're going to get very familiar with all right-of-way within the downtown area. So if it's in the public right-of-way, we are definitely dealing with an easier process. If it's not, we're back to speaking with individual property owners.
One part. Okay, one last question and comment. I do really think that the public art program is a great one. I've seen it throughout the Bay Area work incredibly well. And I am a little curious as to just what the kind of application and approval process would be for that. Would it be public initiated? Would it be private initiated, collaborative? And then how those might get funded as well. Would those be grants? Would those be something that, I hate to say a developer would pay for, but are there other funding mechanisms for the public art as well?
That's one of those questions we don't yet have the answer for. But noting that, we are going to be reaching out to the art community to gather their input. It's possible that they're aware of grant opportunities that we've not historically gone after. So we're going to reach out to anyone who's willing to speak to us on this topic.
If I can just add, part of the plan is a funding plan. We're going to start and have a menu of everything that we want for dinner, and then we're going to look at the bill and figure out, okay, what do we really end up with dinner, and how do we get funding, and if it's grants, if it's innovative ways to generate funding locally, we'll look at all those things.
Commissioner Beaumont.
Yeah, Tyra, thanks so much for that plan. It's going to be great watching it develop. I do have a question on homeowners, maybe businesses that aren't in line with what we're doing. Has the city used eminent domain, like for Town Square or anything, for those businesses that were wiped out when that was developed?
Well, Well, to my limited knowledge, the city typically tries to shy away from eminent domain. It is definitely our preference to work with property owners to seek out the best choice that's going to benefit not only the community but also the property owner. I don't know if anyone else knows anything. Maybe Mr. McCauley can answer that.
Mr. McCauley.
He's
That
worked
was
with
actually,
redevelopment.
most of that acquisition was done by the redevelopment agency. And when Vacaville established its redevelopment agencies, it specifically did not grant them the power of eminent domain. So everything was done on a willing seller basis. As far as things that would be then turned over for private development. If we were doing it, for example, for a parking lot, we could do it through eminent domain, though I think those were also done through willing seller agreements. But our redevelopment agency never had that ability to exercise eminent domain.
Thanks, Bob. And one other question on the connectivity plan. Have you thought about how you're going to deal with the homeless? Because a lot of people don't want to go down to the creek walk because of the homeless. And if we don't deal with that problem, it's going to be a problem to make that useful for all the families that want to use it.
So I don't have an answer for you yet. However, as part of our technical advisory committee, we do have members of the city's community response unit, CREW for short. That's the specialized police unit that works with our homeless encampments, our homeless individuals. We're going to be working with them to address such issues as homelessness. We're also going to be working with CREW to address potential safety concerns as it relates to late night businesses downtown. So we don't have the answer yet, but we are aware it's something we need to address, and that will be addressed as part of one of our safety strategy.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioner comments before I open the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this topic? Fairly empty out there. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. And any other commissioner comments before we move forward on this? And we are not making a decision as such tonight, so we're not taking a vote. This was an informational item, so will we have a dispensation on this? How do we go about this?
Yeah, there's no action to take. The next thing you'll probably see is the charrette in May, so look forward to that notice coming forward to you.
Okay. And again, thank you so much for that very, very informative and interesting presentation. It was, I did the walk with you all, and it was at least 2.5 hours through the downtown. It was so, I mean, I've lived here 44 years, and I learned stuff about the downtown that I never knew before. And I thought, wow, we all should be taking these walks more often and hearing all these interesting facts. It was a really nice thing to do.
If I may, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
As part of our 3-day workshop, we will be doing another bus tour.
Oh, another walk?
We haven't figured out the logistics yet, but we'll be doing another tour of downtown. So if anyone else wants to join us, we'll make sure that you're aware of those times, and you're more than welcome to join us.
Yes, perfect. It was very, very informative and interesting. So, okay, saying that I think we've covered that, and again, thank you. We will move on to item B, which is the code audit report. And Fred, I believe that's your department.
Thank you very much. This item is a status report on the Land Use and Development Code Update Project. So just like the last item, no action is needed from the Commission tonight. We want to report to you where we are on getting going on the code update and what's happened to date and what the findings of the final audit looked like. So the purpose of the audit was to evaluate the Land Use and Development Code's ability to implement the city's planning goals and policies, mostly the things articulated in the general plan. And you can see some of the points on the board there: neighborhood preservation and enhancement, economic development, environmental sustainability, so a pretty broad range of broad goals that the city wants to achieve through development. And the zoning ordinance or land use and development code is the main method of implementing those policies for development. The goal of the audit was also to provide recommendations to the city on how to translate city policies into effective and clear code requirements for people to follow. So projects like the first one, which you did take an action on tonight, providing a development project like that with clear standards, easy to follow processes and guidelines for how to implement their project. Again, the code implements the general plan. The code also deals with how to minimize impacts from one use onto adjacent uses or areas, and how to encourage optimal development patterns that would, again, achieve the city's development goals and the vision statements that are identified in the general plan. So really to take hopefully a positive outlook, providing development interests with the ability to understand what they can do to implement projects, as well as providing community members with a clear understanding of how the development and construction process works in the city. The consultant team of Lisa Wise Consulting, who you have had presentations from as we went through the audit, approached their evaluation of the code by really having their team go through the entire code. I mean, the giant, which is a giant compilation of code standards, very large binder of material if you were to see it in hard copy. Their approach was to take a look at the code with respect to the points you see on the screen now, that is this code performing properly for the city? Is it helping the city implement the general plan policies that we have talked about? Is it positive and design friendly? Is it helping people understand how to do development and helping citizens understand how the public review process for projects works? Is it providing for the community character that, again, has been articulated in the general plan and helping us achieve that? And is it open-minded in viewing new uses and new land use concepts that may not have been considered when the code sections were originally written? And I'll supplement that by saying, you know, the current land use and development code that we use was primarily written in the mid-1990s, and so a lot of development standards and concepts may have changed in the intervening time period. It is a good time to look at updating a code. That last update was done not long after adoption of the 1990 general plan, and that was also a good time to take a look. Is the code providing the city with the type of land use regulations that gets you to where you want to go? So the Lisa Wise Consulting team approached their evaluation by also talking to a wide range of folks in town. We conducted some public open house sessions where the general public could come and talk to them, could get a presentation from the consultants on what the code is all about, because it is something that's not necessarily familiar in great detail to many citizens. They also conducted a number of focus group meetings with groups of design professionals, with applicants who have had to use the code provisions to apply for and receive or try to receive approval for projects. They talked with a full range of the city planning staff to get an understanding of how the different departments use the code provisions and what their own experiences are with it, and made presentations to this body to work with you on understanding your impressions of how effective or not effective the current land use and development code is. They talked a lot about providing user-friendly code standards when they, in their approach to helping cities evaluate and revamp their development codes. And what that meant is shown on the bullet points shown here. Is it written in an orderly, clear fashion? Is it brief where it needs to be brief? Is it providing visuals in the document that help people understand code provisions? Is it using clear organization and plain language, which can be something that a zoning ordinance can often lose track of, and can be confusing language and difficult to the point where sometimes it might even take a number of people reading the same section to try and arrive at an understanding of what a code provision means. And the image on the screen here much like the last presentation, some of these are a little darker on my small screen, but they provided us with an example here of just the kinds of concepts they were talking about when they meant, are you providing a user-friendly code? Well, are you providing simple things like just page numbers, proper headings to sections, footers to identify for people where they are in the code? Are you providing adequate cross-references to other sections and chapters in the development codes? Visuals such as charts and tables or diagrams to help people understand the meaning of these things. And of course, the ultimate objective is to get us to a code, either a brand new one or a rewritten version of the current code that is clear and consistent in implementing the general plan, tries to achieve these bullet points, and the consultants, through their interviews with community members, added the italicized language that you see on the screen there to say, for example, including standards that support mixed-use development. So in the current general plan, there's a lot of discussion of mixed-use development, and we heard that in the presentation about the downtown plan. But when the last code was written, there were no standards for mixed-use development in general. And so this is something they want to help us really focus on, and are we achieving what we want to achieve in our development standards? Are we providing thorough and clear recommendations and standards in the code for people to follow? We tried to do this recently with the residential design requirements, where we took a look at how we communicated to residential builders what type of design standards were required of their projects. We found that we did not adequately address all types of residential development that are currently popular, such as smaller lot, single-family development, multifamily development, such as the project Albert presented to you earlier this evening. And so we went through and tried to rewrite those standards to make sure we addressed everything that applicants need to know when they come in and ask the city for development approvals. And are we providing an efficient and predictable process for people? So can they come in and understand what is required of them and how long it will take for them to go through the development process? You were presented with the audit and recommendations report in February, and the consultants took that feedback from the meeting with you and from the open house we had with the public earlier that same day. They presented a final report to the City Council on March 26 with a series of recommendations. Here, we just summarized what it is that the consultants felt they were hearing in those public outreach sessions, that the code needs to be easier to understand and interpret, that the standards did not always reflect current development desires, so such as the issues I talked about with residential development, but there were others that they picked up as they had a chance to talk with people. And one of the good features of this is that most of these discussions they did with focus group teams outside of the staff's presence. So they were able to just have a very frank and open discussion with people about their experience in using the code and how well or not well it seemed to be working for them. They felt that what they found is that many people desired greater flexibility in ways to meet the development standards, the need for some streamlining in the review process. They also related in a way to that point, providing a streamlined review process, providing effective public notification. And we've heard on some recent projects a real concern from citizens that they don't understand how it is they're supposed to learn about projects and proper points at which to weigh in with their own opinions. And so as we went through this, this is an example of one of those points at which you have some challenging, not necessarily conflicts, but some pieces you have to put together to make a code effective at communicating a process, not just to an applicant, but also to the general public. Here's the proper time at which to make your concerns known and how to be more effective as a citizen in being involved in the planning process. And I'll mention the last bullet point there. One of the more interesting comments to the staff is that the focus group teams brought to the table was that people have been having experiences of, I would say, a difficult nature with regard to the policy plans. And policy plans are like master plans and mini zoning ordinances. Typically for commercial and industrial park development areas, they were originally designed to provide a streamlined and easier to follow development review process. But over the course of several decades, they, of course, are an additional set of regulations that an applicant must be aware of in addition to the regular zoning ordinance chapters. And so what the consultants were hearing is that people are finding that increasingly complicated to understand because you have different booklets of development standards you have to consult as an applicant that can sometimes have conflicting or unclear correlations to each other. And so there was an interesting concern voiced there that we were not aware of, and it will be very helpful as they go through their process of evaluating the code. So the issue areas that coming out of the audit that the consultants thought they needed to really focus on are shown on the screen here: usability, providing some clarity in the zoning districts and which land uses in the general plan those correspond to, updating the development standards to really be attuned to the current development standards that applicants are seeking to go through, taking a look at our use regulations. We also have had, over the course of a few months here, quite a bit of input coming from people in the community about specific issues they'd like us to look at. That might be radio towers, as an example, events in single-family zoning and how that can be or not be done. And this was an issue that came out of last year's issue with bed and breakfast uses in residential areas. And there are others. So we did receive a fair number of comments just from the general public on topics that they would like the consultant to look at specifically as they go through their evaluation of the code. The development review and approval process, and compliance with state and federal law. So code usability, again, the really primary takeaway is that the consultants' findings were that people generally find the city's land use and development code a complex and complicated document or set of documents to go through. And so there are a number of steps that we'll look at to try and remedy that situation. So you see their concern about multiple layers of regulations that somebody has to take a look at when they go through a development review. One of the concerns that we should all be aware of and thinking about as we look at the draft code sections that come back to us, that applicants communicated the concern that sometimes they go through all of these multi-layered documents to try and make sure they're meeting all the city's development standards, but are not really certain that they've caught everything because there are so many overlapping documents to look at. They really have a lingering uncertainty that they've properly communicated to their design team how to actually meet the city's standards. So that's a really important thing to learn through a process like this, so we can try and amend the code to be more clear and effective at that. So the recommendation there, they'll be looking, the consultant team will be looking at their in the process at improving the clarity and usability of the code to address the things that we talked about earlier. The second area, they did find that we do have a lot of zoning on property that does not yet match the revised general plan. And so that is something that the city staff will take on to try and do in concert with the process of the rewrite to the code. And we'll move through that process, while at the same time the consultant team will take a look at making sure it's very clear which zoning districts correspond to which general plan land use categories, so there is a clarity and a matching of those two features. Development standards, again, they heard some concern about ineffective and outdated development standards, such as, again, the residential standards that we talked about. And maybe some inflexibility in the way the city's development standards are sometimes written. And so we want to take a look at flexibility. Are we providing the ability for people to use some creativity in their project design to achieve the city's goals? And so a long list of items here that the consultant team proposes to address in their review of the current code standards and how to improve that. We may, looking at the image on the right there, we may take a look at, in some parts of town, using a more form-based development standard, which is really communicating the way a building should look rather than its uses in the same way our current development standards work. Taking a look at maybe some additional administrative review processes that allow an applicant to go through on a staff level review or maybe a director authority action that will help certain smaller scale projects proceed more quickly. And one particular item at the very bottom there, the last bullet point, on multi-use shopping centers. They had apparently a fair amount of input from people talking about the difficulty they have when you have a multi-use commercial building that's designed for a certain type of tenant mix at its beginning. But over years and decades, those uses come and go and change, and the parking requirements, if they're not the same as those for which the building was originally designed, can put them into difficulty of either having to come to the commission to ask for variances to parking or otherwise losing tenants that couldn't locate in buildings. And so they suggested an evaluation of whether there's some more flexibility in a parking standard for a multi-use building that we take a look at. Use regulations, so again, the issue of outdated or maybe inflexible use regulations, the example used by the consultant in some of the things they've seen in their experience. And the city dealt with this a few years ago. We amended the code to address microbreweries. Their comment here was that the zoning ordinance will typically break things down by land use, so retail or commercial uses in one area, manufacturing and industrial uses in another area, special regulations for entertainment uses or restaurants. And their point here with the use of, say, a use like a microbrewery is that oftentimes all of those things happen within one building. So one use includes a restaurant, the entertainment venue, manufacturing, warehousing and distribution of the product that goes in and out. And so some of our zoning may not be as flexible as might be needed for a business like that. And for those of you who were on the commission when we did the code amendments to try and address this type of scenario, we had to actually go through and amend several chapters in the Land Use and Development Code to try and provide for a new business model that the original zoning regulations did not conceive of when they were written. And so, again, here the suggestion is we need to try and take a look at looking ahead to the way uses are now being formatted and put together and see if we can address those in a forward-thinking manner in a code that gets rewritten. Other issues I identified on the screen there, trying to maybe combine some of the regulations that are currently in policy plans just directly into the code, and that might allow us to reduce the size of or even eliminate policy plans, and again, help somebody not have to go through those multiple overlapping documents to assess their project feasibility. Development review and approval. So again, here we'd be looking at review and approval processes, which projects have to come before the Planning Commission, which projects go through a staff level design review or use approval process, and which go on to the City Council for hearing. So a good evaluation of, are we getting that right? Are we helping the projects that we want to help go through in a more quick fashion, or which don't involve issues of controversy? Are we providing an adequate review process for those that need more scrutiny in their review? And finally, compliance with state and federal law. These are really ongoing on an annual basis. You have to go through and take a look at the codes, typically based on amendments to state law that happen annually. So the consultant at their presentation on March 26th to the City Council presented a work plan for how they would recommend a project be done. They suggested a thorough evaluation of those code chapters that you see in red on the screen here, mostly focusing on Chapter 14.09, which is the zoning ordinance, contains the use regulations and development standards and most of the things we've talked about, but also looking at some of the other ones that are really connected to projects that are going through the development review process. Others such as the ones that are in black on the screen there, maybe chapters that don't really require a thorough, comprehensive update, but they get evaluated on a more regular basis. The planned growth ordinance, we suggested to them, would be an item that really should be evaluated separately by the city after we complete some other project master planning processes. And as far as a work plan, the consultant team proposed a work plan that would involve a multi-layered review process. They proposed taking what you see there called modules of draft regulations, focusing just on one module at a time, the 4 categories at the bottom there, the smaller boxes, preparing proposed revisions to the code sections for a review in a series of public focus group and open house meetings, as well as presentations before the Planning Commission, taking on and doing that in a sequential manner, so that we would see one, we would review it, give them feedback, move on to the next one, take a look at that segment of the code, and give them enough feedback so they could then take those comments, compile a rough draft of an entire code for us, go back through another public review process through that same series of types of meetings before they prepare a complete and final proposed draft code that would go forward again with another series of public open house and review meetings and being presented to the Commission for a recommendation and the Council for action. The proposed timeline on what you see there would take us through the review of those modules by the end of the summer this year. So fairly quick time frame. We'd be expecting to come back to you with presentations on those rough draft modules of codes every couple of months. And then toward the end of the year, being able to compile an administrative draft or rough draft of the entire document, and look toward early next year or spring of next year to be able to present for public hearings a proposed code update. So the City Council at their meeting on the 26th did direct us to go forward and work on a complete proposal from the consultant team. They authorized the city manager to enter into a work agreement with the Lisa Wise Consulting Group team, and this would be the kind of the general outlines of that work program and plan that we wanted to present to you tonight.
Thank you, Fred. That was a lot. This seems like an overwhelming task, but I'm sure the Lisa Wise Group and you all are up to the task for sure. So do we have, yes we do, Commissioner McCauley. Why am I not surprised?
So the most, I'll have to be careful about what reputation I'm getting. The most engaging thing that we do here is we review projects. But I think the most important thing we do is we set standards and procedures. And I'm pleased with what I see for reviewing the procedures and the standards, and don't rush. The idea of getting things through this summer, I don't want to drag it out for years and years, partly because having the same general commission review it gets you a better review. So let's not lollygag on it, but don't rush so fast that we miss opportunities for public engagement, that we don't really talk about in detail what we're doing and what that means for the community and what it means for us up here when a project actually then comes forward to us with the new zoning ordinance and other documents in place. Similar to what we did with the residential design standards. That came back through the wash cycle a couple of times, but it was a better document because of it. Good process, good project, don't rush, end.
Thank you, Commissioner McCauley. Does anyone else on the commission have any commissioner comments before we open the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Seeing no public folks coming to the lectern, we'll close the public hearing, and we have no more commissioner comments. We have no action on this. This was an informational item only.
Yes, so no action on it, but you will have many meetings in the future to get into the nitty-gritty on this.
We will, and we'll be looking forward to the updates and seeing what is going to come out of this, and I think it's going to be interesting. I certainly hope it's going to make this whole thing easier for the applicants that are coming in to develop things in Vacaville. It'll make it much easier for them to go through the process, and that's the whole point of it. So thank you, Fred and staff. Excellent. And we are going to move right on to item number 10A, which is current planning, and Albert came rushing up, so I assume Albert's going to present that.
That's correct. So I'm going to give you a brief update on what kind of activity we experienced here in the month of March. We received 2 notable applications. One was for the Vanden Gate house plans. It's a plan development request to construct 3 new house plans on 43 lots in that subdivision, which is located off of Vanden Road, south of Alamo. It's south of the Sterling Chateau Unit 4 subdivision. The proposal would be 1 single-story and 2 two-story plans that would range from 2,300 square feet to 3,300 square feet in size. So we received that application. We're currently reviewing that. We also received an application from Verizon. It's a conditional use permit, and it's to install a 65-foot tower over at Covenant Community Church at 3870 Alamo Drive for the purpose of housing a large telecommunication facility. That would include 12 panel antennas, remote radio units, and some other ancillary equipment. Some other projects that were approved in March include the Nut Tree Business Park time extension. That one's been kicking around for a while. The director approved a 2-year extension to that. The business park includes 3 buildings, approximately 175,000 square feet, with 3 driveways. This is back behind the Nut Tree core area along Nut Tree Road. Another smaller project that was reviewed and approved is out by Crocker Drive, 700 Crocker Drive. At the end there was it's a very big campus of industrial buildings and parking area that's being looked at for occupation. And one of the large parking areas out there was identified as a suitable site for vehicle marshaling or storage of vehicles that are being brought in from Oakland and then stored there momentarily and then shipped off to different areas. And so we reviewed a conditional use permit for that, for a portion of that parking area to be used for that. So if you see any activity out there, that's what's going on over there. Other activity, people are still having home-based businesses. We received 19 applications for home occupation permits and approved 19 applications. We're busy with building permit plan checks. We reviewed 27 applications for a Sleep First tenant improvement, another Verizon wireless cell tower that was off of Bella Vista Road. Montera house plans, that's over in Vanden Estates. You'll see some activity going out there with housing construction. And then also the Parkside house plans that the commission reviewed, I think, in February. We processed 6 tree removal permits and approved 8, and we were pretty busy with inquiries. We had about 111 inquiries that we worked with people on, customers, residents, and 1 zoning complaint. And just a informational item for the commission, if anybody has any questions about current development, or if you have questions that you receive from residents in the city or business owners in the city, we're the group that you would go and ask those questions to, and we will see what we can do to help you out. If we know the information or if we know where to find it, we'll point you in the right direction. That's it.
Thank you, Albert. Any questions for Albert?
I've got one, yeah.
Nikolai.
Yeah, on that note, I had a question about what's going on at the Fresh Choice that's been abandoned for about 10 years now. I know there's fencing and there's a leasehold sign out front of it. Looks like they're doing some type of an infill or renovation.
As I understand it, that was the Sleep First tenant improvement that we reviewed.
Was that the one?
I think that, I'm not too sure about how that tenant space is going to be diced up. I've heard that it'll be brought up into 2 tenant spaces, and one of them is for Sleep First, for that mattress.
Is that a mattress place? Just what we need. Yeah. There. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. I know you have no control over that, so, but
people got to sleep.
All right. I figured something exciting. Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Beaumont.
Yeah, Albert. Yesterday morning, there was a county meeting on Farmstead, and I wondered what happened at that, because I know there was an organizing group that was trying to get a bunch of people down there against it, because I live in that area, and I just wondered what, if anything, what happened.
Yeah, I can update you on that. So that was the Farmstead annexation, the project that was reviewed here in October, I think, last year. So the Local Agency Formation Commission, or LAFCO, which votes on whether to approve annexations into city limits, did review the project. They did unanimously vote to approve the annexation, so that will go forward.
Albert, the address you gave on Alamo Drive for the tower, what was that address? 10 something, I believe.
3870 Alamo Drive. Yeah, it's for the Covenant Community Church.
The Verizon Tower?
Yeah, that's the one that's going to be a bell tower. They have a design for a bell tower.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, got
And they're
it.
going to house the their proposal is to house the telecommunication facility, the antenna panel, so you won't even notice it.
What a great idea. Awesome. Okay, thank you, Albert. I don't see any more questions, so let's move on to item B, advanced planning. And Fred, is that you?
And that is. So things going on. So we did submit the annual status of the general plan and housing element report to the state of California as required by the beginning of April. That went in, and that's important to keep the housing element current and in good standing with the state, and to preserve our eligibility for grant proposals, such as many of the ones that Tyra, I think, talked about in our downtown planning and our PDA planning. So it was a big step to get that compiled and into the state. Every year they've been getting more and more complex and detailed on things the state requires each city to tell them, and it was a good achievement. We will go back to council next week with a proposal that they accept the plan that we talked about for the Land Use and Development Code update. So that'll be on the agenda. We hope they'll approve the final work proposal and plan, and we'll just be moving forward as quickly as we can on that. The downtown specific plan, the charrette that Tyra mentioned, so that is one of our first big steps in the downtown specific plan process, to have that multi-day charrette, and that is looking like the third week of May at this point. Tomorrow there is an open house, a city-sponsored open house at the Lattice Community Center to talk about cannabis regulations. And so this is following up on the process of the state laws that changed, and having an open house to discuss different aspects of cannabis regulations. So what type of uses, say retail or manufacturing or research, should be allowed, and if so, in what form and how. And that will happen, I get the times right, from 4 p.m. until 7 p.m. at the Lattice Community Center. Do I have that time correct, Barton? Sorry.
4 to 8 p.m.
4 to 8 p.m. Okay, very good. The Farmstead project, which we talked about, so that did go before the LAFCO yesterday. It was approved, and that also includes the annexation of what would have been then the unincorporated island, the 10 small parcels left over. That was also approved. They were not required by the commission to be done at the same time, so it does allow the Farmstead project to move forward if there's any difficulty or holdup on moving forward with the smaller area. The otherwise, in the other items going on, Vanden Meadows, some of the projects that Albert mentioned from home builders, the Advanced Planning Division is looking at a lot of improvement plans and subdivision maps for those projects down in the Vanden Meadows area. And the same is still going on for the Roberts Ranch area. So we're looking at the first 4 villages within the Roberts Ranch development area, improvement plans, which are the subdivision construction plans, and that includes the first mini park, the stroller park that the developer designed for the residential area out there, and the larger, up against the railroad tracks, the open space area, the first quarter of that, which includes the large dog park facility that'll be built with that first phase of the project.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments or questions for Fred? Seeing none, we will move on then to item number 11A, City Council's actions pertaining to the Planning Commission items. Barton, are you taking care of that?
Yes. A few things. The City Council adopted an agricultural and avian mitigation fee at their March meeting. So this is a fee that typically when a developer develops a property like in farmland, they have to go out and buy a conservation easement on a separate piece of farmland to provide mitigation for the loss of that farmland. What we've done is worked with the Solano Land Trust, established a fee that they can pay. They'll go to the land trust, who then purchase the conservation easements and manage those easements. So the council has adopted that fee. The council also adopted an aesthetic policy for 5G wireless facilities as a temporary measure. The law on 5G wireless has changed, and there was recent change in regulations, and the recommendation was that if you want to regulate the aesthetics, you need to do so by April 14th, which was recent. So we adopted a policy, and then we'll come back with a fuller ordinance in a month or two on that. Coming up also on April 23rd, the council will be considering the planned growth ordinance allocations for the Casa de Vista project that you just heard. It's subject to the planned growth ordinance, and they do need allocations, so there are available for this project. Then a couple other items just to make you aware of. We are holding another open house for the Green Tree project. This will be on Thursday, April 25th from 3 to 7 at the Leisure Town Town Hall facility. And I know several commissioners have expressed interest in going there. You can, just please don't congregate in groups of 4 if you're there. If you can stagger when you're there, that would be good. We don't want to have any Brown Act violations on that. And also just want to let you know that the Lower Lagoon Valley project, they're working on infrastructure plans for that. The first phases of that will require getting sewer and water to the site, and the sewer will need to go from the project site, which is south of Lagoon Valley Park, through the park, up over the hill, and the water, they'll be building a reservoir on the south side of their property, and they'll require a reservoir and a water line and booster pump station through the park. So there will actually be some construction that is expected to occur in the park this year. It'll be actually pretty minor. It'll be the sewer lift station, the water booster pump station, and a new park restroom. Construction should happen this year, and there'll be more construction anticipated next year of the sewer line. So if you see that happening, you know what's going on. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Barton? Seeing none. Item B.
I think I covered. Next meeting. Yes, your next meeting is May 21st, 2019, and I don't know what items are going to be on the agenda yet. We're still kind of working on a couple things, so I'll let you know.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any commissioner comments before we close the meeting? I would like to welcome our 3 new commissioners to the Planning Commission. I hope you enjoyed your first evening, and we're glad to have you with us and look forward to working with you throughout the coming years.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
Nancy, do you want the binders back to recycle for the next meeting, or how do you want to work? I like the binders. I like the idea. I think it's great.
My thought is that you can keep them and use them monthly
put our
and put the
packets in
new
it.
packets in them as they arrive.
All right, sounds good. Thank you again for doing it. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That you wanted to thank you. This is great. It's so organized and nicely done. Any other commissioner comments or, yes, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the mayor and the city council for the appointment. I look forward to working with this commission, and I also recognize the prior commissioners and the good work that you're doing, and I'm excited to be part of it. Also, at the March 19th meeting, Vice Chair McCauley recommended that we watch the video "Seattle is Dying." I was in the audience. I wasn't up here, but I took heed, and I did watch that this past weekend, and I just wanted to say that very important and information that I got from that. But more than that, just to kind of tag off what you said, it's important for people in the Planning Commission and the City Council to be proactive in dealing with the homelessness issue, and we are, and I'm glad to be part of that, and good recommendation.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any words of wisdom before we close the meeting? Well, with that, we will close the meeting for tonight, and good night, Vacaville.